Welcome back, students. Now, in this section, we are going to learn the transformation of function and the technique to sketch the graph. Now, actually, we can sketch the graph based on the basic shape of the function. For example, right now, if we have this function y equals to x squared, and for y equals to x squared plus 2, we actually shift the graph up for 2 units. Okay, so you can see here, actually we shift the graph up for 2 units here. Okay, so if we have x squared minus 2, then we shift the graph down. Okay, so the vertical shift happen when we have the function x squared, right, plus or minus a value. Now, if the plus or minus the certain value happen inside the function, right, the graph will be shifted horizontally, all right, shifted left and right. And if we multiply the function with a negative value, so reflection happen. All right, so let's take a look using this example, right, to understand better. Okay, now first, right, what happens if we have x squared plus 2? Okay, I'm going to show you using the graph here. Now this graph represents y equals to x squared. Now what happens is if we have x squared plus 2, right, you can see here actually the graph has been shifted up for 2 units. Okay, so we shift the graph up for 2 units here. Now what happens if we have x squared minus 2? Right, when we have x squared minus 2, the graph will be shifted down for 2 units. Okay, so the graph will be shifted vertically if we have the function plus or minus a certain value. Right, now let's see. Now if we have the function plus or minus inside the function. Now if we have x plus 2 squared, you can see here the addition, right, the operation happen inside the function, inside the square. So you can see here we actually shift the graph, right, to the left hand side. Right, so when we plus 2, we shift the graph to the left hand side, and if we minus 2, we shift the graph to the right hand side. Okay, right, so from here we know that if we shift the graph, we have the operation inside the function, we shift the graph horizontally. Next, now if we multiply the function with a negative value, what happened? Now actually for this graph y equals to x squared, for this graph, all right, when we multiply with negative, all the y now become the negative y. Okay, so this will be x squared is the y here, so it will become all the negative value for all the values here. Right, it will become negative value. Therefore, the graph has been reflected. Okay, what about if we multiply a certain value here? All right, multiply by 2. All right, so you can see here the graph goes closer to the y-axis. Right, so if we multiply less than 1, for example, multiply with 1 over 2, all right, we can see the graph go further away from the y-axis. All right, so in this case we have plus, minus, all right, multiply, right, and multiply with greater than 1 or multiply with lesser than 1, and we can actually see the transformation on the graph. Now, so let's see how do we actually sketch the graph by using all this understanding. Now let's say we want to find y equals to negative f x plus 3 plus 1. So how does the graph look like? Okay, now to sketch this graph, first we are going to start with the x squared. Okay, so we are going to start with x squared. Okay, y equals to x squared, right? fx equals to x squared. Now, when we have f plus 3, now what happened here? Alright, so we can see here actually we have x plus 3 square, right? So we shift the graph to the left hand side for 3 units. So you can imagine that we actually shift the graph here for 3 units. What is the value here? Negative 3. Okay, so the graph has been shifted to the left hand side for 3 units. Now after that, right, we start with the negative. We follow with the negative here. We have negative f x plus 3, and this will give us negative x plus 3 square. Okay, now what happens if this graph multiply with negative? Right, what happens if the graph here multiply with negative? So it will be reflected with the with respect to the x-axis, right? So here we can see that if we multiply with negative, the graph actually reflected right upon the x-axis. So we will have a negative 3 here, and this is the graph. Okay, so when the x is 0, alright, the y is 9, and therefore this is negative 9, of course. Right, so we reflect the graph there. Now finally, when we have y equals to negative f x plus 3 plus 1, we shift the graph up for 1 unit. So we're going to shift the graph up for 1 unit. So the graph will be like this. Okay, since we shift the graph up for 1 unit, alright, so it will be 1 here, and this is negative 3. So negative 9 shifted up for 1 unit, it will be negative 8. Therefore, we can have the graph like this. Okay, now let's use the graphing tool, right, to actually to verify our answer here. Okay, now so first we start with x plus 3, right? Okay, start with x plus 3. So we shift the graph to the left hand side for 3 units. Now after that, the whole function multiply with negative, so the graph actually reflected with upon the y-axis, upon the x-axis. Okay, reflected upon the x-axis. And after that, the graph plus 1. So we have something like this. So this value, right, this is 1 here, this is 3, negative 3, right, and the y is 1. And the y-intercept is negative 8. So we have the graph like this. So we can use the transformation technique here to sketch the graph.